Hi, everyone. This is Ashley with the Urban Ash team at Point View Real Estate. We're going to sit down with Jennifer Peterson of First American Title and Escrow today. This is our second episode of our two-part series, the first being Title 101, and this one is going to be about Escrow 101. So we're going to touch on just the escrow process, the role escrow has in a transaction before, during, and after the transaction, and then also just some general red flags and things that all parties can do to make the escrow process smoother. So let me know if you have any questions, and I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Thank you again for joining us for our second edition here for Escrow 101. I know we've kind of said that maybe this is more of a lively topic than Title 101. I think a lot more goes into it from the consumer side, or from, the interactions of the buyers, sellers, agents, lenders. Like, it seems, escrow has so many connections with people throughout the transaction that and they touch so many different people that it is a little bit more exciting in that regard. So we kind of came up with a list of questions that, we wanted to cover today from both perspective of, again, buyers, sellers, agents, and just kind of overall explain, what is escrow and what is escrow's role in a transaction and after a transaction. So I'll let you kind of, take the floor here and starting with basically the questions like, what is escrow and how do they kind of manage the transaction? And then we'll go from there.
Okay. Escrow, the biggest thing they are is an intermediary third party. They're neutral. They don't represent the buyer or the seller or either of the agents or the lender, but they work for everyone. And they follow all of the instructions to do all of the things that are necessary in order for property to be transferred from the seller to the buyer, providing them clear title and wrapping up all of the funds that need to be dispersed, and taking care of everything.
Yeah, putting all the pieces together.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of pieces.
So starting from the buyer standpoint, when, let's say, you go into contract or mutual, then at that point, the agent that's representing either the buyer or the seller will send the contract to escrow, and escrow will open the file. What is the next step typically from the buyer's point of view that they're going to have interaction with escrow?
Yes, the first lead, they'll receive a bunch of emails from us. And one of the emails is going to be for our secure portal. And so they're going to be invited to that. And that's a way for us to take email out of the equation for transferring information that is private in nature that could lead to identity theft in the future. And so the buyer has multiple questions to answer in regards to the transaction, and then they have a way to communicate. We can send them wiring instructions, things of that nature. And from a buyer standpoint, there's a lot of activity at the beginning and a lot of activity at the end. And then there's always this period in the middle where there's not a lot of communication, but it would be helpful if a buyer knew that there's going to be a period of time when it seems like nothing's happening, but there is work being done. It's just behind the scenes.
Yep. So one of your tools, I guess, for being that we're talking about earnest money here, you guys have the ability now that buyers can pay via an app or a link, pay their earnest money.
Yeah, that says the Zocum app. And so they basically write a personal check to First American, and they take a picture of that check and deposit it mobily. The one reason why we wouldn't want to go that route is because it is a personal check. If it's a situation where earnest money is being released immediately to the seller, we definitely want to go the wire route, because a hold is on that earnest money check for about a week. And so it would mean that we wouldn't be able to release that yet.
Good point. Yeah, I didn't really think of that, actually. So that's a good way, because a lot of people are releasing earnest money right away now.
Yes.
So you'd probably have to go the wire route anyway there. And a lot of times too, buyers, they come into town, they secure their home, then they leave and they go back to, their home where they're currently living. So I think escrow also manages during the process, like where is the buyer going to be for signing purposes and all that sort of thing. So it's very important for buyers to be communicating all that information.
Very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm assuming that is in the buyer packet too. Of like, I think I've seen that. Are you traveling?
Yes, the questions are in there because it's definitely something that we want to know.
Yeah, for sure. So on the seller side, then, when escrow is opened, they also get invitation to the portal too.
They do. And their questions are even more important than the buyer questions because it's about who we're going to pay off, who are their utility holders, and things of that nature. And that is also where they can upload their wiring instructions. Actually, it's not an upload. It's they're entering in like their routing number and their ABA number and their checking account number on from their check. And that's how we can send them their proceeds at close.
That's very, very, very important.
Everyone wants their money.
Yes, they do. But then also in that process, it's important for sellers to do that within, depending on when it's closing, but definitely within that first week. Because I know there's information that escrow needs from, let's say, the lender, payoff amounts, all that sort of thing. And also a lot of the times with the condominiums, they need to be able to get the condo demands from the actual HOAs and the management companies. And sometimes that in itself has their delays. So I see that sometimes as the sellers really need to get in there and fill out all that information. A lot of times they don't know. And so we end up kind of helping them out, with that, or they don't have their utility information on file, but we kind of help them as much as we can there. With utilities in general, I know that you guys always kind of hold back a certain amount for the seller, for Seattle City Light. Do you want to kind of explain how that kind of the utility?
Yeah, they can't have a final utility reading until actually it closes and then they're no longer being charged for utilities, whether it be water or Seattle City Light in that case. And then what we do is we wait for the final bill to come in and then we'll pay the final bill and we'll refund the money to the seller that we owe them.
Got it. Okay. And so with Seattle City, just because we're talking primarily Seattle City Light, a lot of the times with, and then over on the east side to be Puget Sound Energy. And then with condos specific, those HOA dues include utilities. And so they wouldn't have to worry about that. It's purely just the Seattle City Light, maybe gas every once in a while.
Yeah, for us, if it's a municipality governing the utility, and so Seattle City Light is, and Puget Sound Energy is not, which is interesting. So in this area, Seattle City Light is the only electric company that is owned by a municipality, and then sometimes it's trash too. So we really have to be specific on the property because some trash companies are owned by a municipality, so they can lien the property as well. So sometimes, almost always water, sometimes electric, sometimes trash.
Got it. And so that's interesting because I didn't actually know that. And so with Puget Sound Energy, then do you guys still withhold, or you're able to actually cut it off at that point?
No, the way their accounts work is it goes with the individual. And so there's less risk for them because they're probably going to have electricity somewhere else. And so if they don't settle up their bill, they won't, it's going to just get forwarded to them eventually. So they are a lot more, they're easier to deal with. So we don't do anything with PSA.
Got it. So it's a little bit more relaxed. But still, buyers are responsible for opening up their own account, right? So at closing, buyers open that up. Sellers, you guys close the accounts, or is that correct?
If it's a lienable account, they'll be
so only the municipalities. If you're PSC or any of the private companies, you're responsible for doing that on your own. Yeah. So good to know. So during a transaction, then we kind of know what the different roles for the buyers, sellers. Are there anything the agents that you see can do to kind of help things along or be of assistance?
Yes, the secure portal invitation is one of the most important pieces of communication that we can get to either party. And the way that works is that when we put the cell phone number in there or any phone number, really, email address and phone number for the buyer and the seller, because that's what generates the invitation to the secure portal. And so I know that there's a lot of reasons that agents don't want to put their contact information on the contract, but as long as we have it in an email, then we can put it in our system. But that is really the only way that we can generate the portal invitations. So
Okay.
that's pretty important on the front end. And then also making sure we get copies of all addenda as they come up.
Mm-hmm. Good. Because some people have transaction coordinators and some don't. So a couple, the key milestones for agents obviously is, the full mutual purchase and sale agreement. It's your inspection, the 34, the 35, the 35 are the response periods. If there's any credits, I see that as kind of things that get slipped through the cracks is when you don't tell, you settle up your inspection, not so much right now because it's such a competitive market, but in those cases where you are able to, you're able to negotiate a credit on one behalf of another, that it doesn't get sent to escrow and then all of a sudden settlement statements go out and then you're like, no, there's a $2,000, there should be $2,000 to the buyer. So it's really important to provide all those kind of material documents to escrow so they know exactly what to put on the settlement statement.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then as far as the role, let's say after a transaction is closed, where does escrow fit in there?
Well, once everything closes, that is when the disbursements happen. So that's when we're paying off the seller's mortgages and settling up taxes, sending out commission checks, giving the seller their proceeds, all of that. And then the hold back for the utilities. So they've still got to wrap up quite a few things afterwards. And then they send out final settlement statements to the parties. And so up until that point, everything has been an estimated settlement statement. And then you have a final one at the end.
Yep. And that's where a seller could see a check come through with some funds maybe that were held, by their escrow company at that point. And yeah. So during closing day, I guess let's say a week before close date is occurring, what is escrow doing at that point?
They have their hair on fire.
Yeah.
They're wrapping everything up. They're getting the final statements. They are reaching out to the parties to schedule their signings. One of the things is that when a buyer is getting a loan, they have to wait until they get loan documents before they can schedule the signing. And so that's always kind of a fire drill because we usually get documents and the buyer will need to sign, like we'll get them in the morning and the buyer has to sign that afternoon of the next day. So it's a very short window. I've always, it's hard that we can't put our best foot forward a little bit better in regards to that, to give the buyers a little bit of a window. Wow. But at this point
well, you're kind of at the mercy of the lender, right? So like the lender's doing their final underwriting, they're getting the final loan approval, and then you're sitting there waiting for closing docs. Like even today, we had one that we're supposed to close on today, but the lender hasn't gotten the docs to you guys, right? And so we're pushing out, we're trying to get an update on that. But if you don't, without those loan docs, the seller could sign, right? Because the seller's already signed their paperwork and done all that. But the buyer's really just waiting on the second that the lender gets the docs to you guys and you scramble, put everything together and then get the signing appointment. And the buyer, I think that there is a period of the buyer's just like flustered, trying to get everything all, queued up. And then there's this little calmness on closing day, which is just like, okay, hurry up and wait. Mm-hmm. Right. You just hurry it up and wait. And on the day of closing, why don't you talk a little bit about that with the funding and all, how that's all handled?
Yes. And so after the buyers do sign their documents, then the lender will work with escrow on what we call balancing the file. And so they make sure down to the very penny, everything matches exactly what it's supposed to match. And at that point in time, the lender will give us the okay when they're ready that they're funding the file and they're released to record. And so that is what we're waiting for. And so we'll usually tell people we're released to record, which makes everyone feel better. But in this market, the county is not as fast as they used to be. And so we don't always get recording numbers back same day. Sometimes it's the next day.
And we have addendums for that too, that kind of safeguard the transaction. You guys insure the transaction at that point, right?
Yeah, we insure for in case anybody slipped in there, recorded something in between when we're released and when it record.
Yeah.
Since the county is so slow, it's not very likely that would happen.
Yeah. I've been pretty lucky this year in terms of our closing not having. I think I've only had like one or two that have been delayed. Other than that, it's not. I mean, honestly, it happened because of COVID, right? Where we were kind of half staffed but overloaded with way more sales than they had seen,
Right,
in
right.
years. So that's the reason why that kind of all came about. But
Mhm.
good. So the famous release to record, I always kind of laugh and say that that's like one of my, well, it's final approval and then release to record, and
Mhm.
recording numbers are in, are one of my favorite little phrases. So once we get the recording numbers, and again, buyers, that point we coordinate as agents, keys to the buyer or to the listing, or listing agent to the buyer's agent. And at that point, it's a done deal. As far as how does the escrow roll then after the transaction to work in conjunction with the lender and the loan balance?
As far as like paying it off,
Yeah.
they usually, everything is wired. And so they will pay off the lender. There's always a little bit of an overage there. That overage will go right back to the seller.
Got it. Yeah. So again, that little bonus check after a transaction is complete.
Yeah, it's a nice little surprise.
Yeah. What are some hurdles, I guess, that maybe escrow, the team has control over first, and maybe things that they don't have control over, red flags or just general issues that come up?
Yeah, this is going to be a little repeat from last time, but escrow is really responsible for clearing title. So anything that's challenged for title is ultimately a challenge for escrow. Title's like, here it is, here's the problem, but they don't actually do anything about it. Escrow is the one that has to coordinate any paperwork that's necessary in order to make title perfect, in order for it to close. So they're looking for operating agreements for LCs and things like that. And they're looking for trust documents and statements of information if there's things on title that may or may not belong to our parties. And so all of those things become hurdles for escrow. And then at the end, we already talked about loan documents, but not to throw lenders under the bus, but because sometimes it's a delay in the buyer getting their documentation to the lender, which causes the lender to have a problem, not a problem, but have a delay.
But yeah, it's really important for buyers to be on top of that stuff, because that will be the number one source of any delays, is not being able to kind of move things through their underwriting system and get back to appropriate parties with conditions and all that sort of thing. Yep. All right. And then you kind of touched on other red flags, or getting all the paperwork. So like you said, death certificates, entity information, all that stuff, which we coach our clients to have that up front so that, those delays don't come up.
That's ideal.
Yeah. And I guess we do see the delays, like, as I mentioned earlier, with the condo association, sometimes property managers not getting back. I know lately there's been a lot of information, or some delays, or just questions in the ninth hour about insurance, and the lenders requesting information from maybe the HOAs, or just information in general from the HOAs to do their final clearance and approval for those type of things. So those are things that escrow really doesn't have their hands in, but again, it's communication with the condo associations and stuff to make sure all the information.
Yeah, which is another reason why it's doing the portal information early is good, because it's often only the seller that knows about who their HOA contact is. It's not a matter of public record. So unless they tell us, we're still in the dark.
Yep, for sure. Good. So I think we pretty much covered a lot of what we're trying to today, other than new features that you guys have right now or are working on at First American.
We're currently doing a lot of remote online notaries, which is a very different process than what we normally have done in the past. It's been something that's been necessary because of COVID, but at this point, more than 1 out of every 4 sellers signs that way. And so it's very different. They're either at a computer or they're on their phone, and they do their signing without coming into the office. They can be anywhere in the world. And it's really helped us a lot with transactions where somebody's on a submarine or it's very interesting. So how it works is it's not like they're showing up with their ID and they're saying, this is who I am. They do show their ID, but they also have to go through the process that is called knowledge-based authentication. And so it's the questions they have to answer correctly come from their credit report. so there are things that they probably would only know. And so that's how they ascertain they're the right person to sign for this person. And so that's a very interesting new trend. And the sellers are rating it with 4 and 5 stars for the process. They just love it.
Yep. What is every seller eligible to do that, or is there only some that are?
Most are, but you do need to have a social in order to, and a 5-year credit history. So if you've been issued a tax identification number recently and you have no history of 5 years, then you wouldn't qualify.
Got it. And you guys do all that history check and stuff before you send that out?
We have a team that coordinates all of that. And so they are in communication, holding their hands the entire way. And so they will determine that they're not able to do it. And then we'll do things the old fashioned way.
Got it. So for those folks who are in Canada, who are non-resident alien for tax purposes, or not one, they would have to sign the old way at an
right now. But I did just hear that we are working on, there's a company that is bringing in Canadian, I think they're called SINs. I don't know, but they're the Canadian Social Security number is going to work at some point in time, and then they hope to expand.
Awesome. Well, that sounds good. Now, on the buyer side, does a buyer's lender ever require a seller to sign in front of a notary?
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes they do, and we will accommodate that as well. And we are seeing more and more lenders coming on board with letting their buyers to sign that way, but it's a lot more complicated because they like to have the note, which is the promise to pay the money back. They want it signed in wet ink.
Got it. Okay. Do you know any lenders off the top of your head that are like allowed?
I don't. Yeah, it's still, they're coming along, but there aren't very many at this point.
Got it. Yeah. That would just make life so much easier. Good. All right. Anything else you want to kind of share about the ESCO world? Has there been any changes in like legislation or laws or anything like that, or it's all
the remote online notary? We don't often have new things pop up, but that is our newest thing. That since COVID, we're waiting for a national law to come through. Right now it's legal in Washington, but for instance, it's not legal in California. So until that legislation passes, then it will become legal in California, but that's a pretty big state. There's only a few holdouts, and California is one of them, which is kind of surprising.
Can I ask you a question that just popped in my mind? Let's say, the transaction is here in Washington, but the seller is in California. They could still sign underneath Washington. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
so it's only selling it in California.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Just if where the property is located.
Yeah, where the property is located. Okay, cool. Good. Well, thank you as always for your time. This is good to kind of just touch base on kind of the basics of escrow, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. We'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.